Welcome everyone to January 2026, the new year of MonoGame. You'll notice some differences and changes as we speed things up, as we've got new investment and things like that. But we're here to get on with the party and on with the show. So, jumping straight in, as we're here, saying we're January 26th, making new flights and launches to the brave new world that is MonoGame. And we're here for all things new and upcoming. So, we're going to talk about the 385 release. We're desperately sorry this is not out sooner, but we're packing a lot in, and we're going to show you what's there. We're going to go over the finances, especially with the new donation we had from Concerned Date. A big thank you to Stardew Valley and the community out there helping to support and grow MonoGame. All we can do is hope to keep moving on. And then obviously, brave new news is that the community site is going back. And going over the future bounties and the roadmap, and then obviously question and answers. So, as we dig into this, MonoGame now, we're doing more and more as we head into 2026. So, we've got the open house, which you're watching now. It's every third Wednesday of the month. We have Tom's Code Time, which is every Friday. I do the MonoGame University, where we're going through the 2D tutorial and more. And then we have a new show coming for 2026 and hopefully some more as well. And as you can see, we're pushing forward, obviously with the university and Tom, and going there, getting all the educational material out for MonoGame, and also this new stream. Now, the new stream, Dom, do you want to speak a little to this?
I'm muted.
Nope, we hear you.
Oh, okay. It says here the host muted my mic. Basically, the MonoGame Spotlight will essentially talk about what's happening in the community, and will initially be every 2 weeks. It's mainly highlighting MonoGame specific news, but we'll also highlight things that may be of interest in general to any game dev. We also plan to highlight recent releases and any upcoming MonoGame releases. Maybe things you should consider wishlisting, for example. First one will be mainly just news, hopefully out next week, early next week. Then, depending on interest, we'll have special guests on to talk tech about their games, interesting game mechanics, inspirations for their game, that sort of thing. If demand increases over the coming months, we might end up doing it weekly. Conversely, if there isn't enough news or interest, then we might drop it back to monthly. If there's something that you think should be mentioned in an upcoming spotlight, either DM me the details or post in the 2D or 3D showcase threads on Discord. That's essentially what it's about.
Yep, I'm excited for this going. This has been something long awaited for. We've had talk from the community where they wanted to be an ability to use MonoGame to showcase their stuff, and that's the whole point of this channel, is that it's news we find, news from our community developers, and then also trying to get developers and other community members on board to talk about this stuff. Much shorter segment, I think as your aim, Tom. We'll see how it goes, and not as frequent or infrequent as we can get it. Okay, so 385, our big looming dragon as it's coming along. We've got over 100 fixes and so, and that's not including a lot of the new stuff that's going in there. We've got several major PRs adding the new preview platforms, which we talked about previously. Vulcan is pretty close now. We've now also added the song mechanics. We've also, thanks to the community, we had some extra bug fixes and things come in, which were causing things like Rider to crash when it started in debug. Ironically, that also was affecting Linux, which we didn't know about, but the community's been on board. If you're not testing, get in there testing with the previews. But ultimately, with all these platforms, they are in preview for the 385, so they're not full intended for production release. So continue on through that tranche of testing. But our hope and aim is that 386 will be not long behind it, especially considering how much time we spent through 385. So get in there, get testing, test those platforms, test your games. Ultimately, the thing we really need now is real projects using these new preview platforms to iron out anything else that might be lurking in the background. Get playing the audio, get playing songs, try effects, different shaders. A few community members have also asked about, well, with Vulkan in DX12, do they have higher shader language support? Which, yes, it natively does. But we need testing. Real world shaders, real world things that you're out there using. Test it, break it, bash it, let us know, and we can improve. And as we get to 386, as we're intending to be more production ready, go for it. And a lot of heat's been coming up at the content builder. Interesting fact about this is that while this is our first attempt, and we've been, as a lot of people have seen, we've been tweaking, changing, trying to make the delivery as tight as possible, work on the different delivery platforms with the content builder. So there is what you have today, where the builder is paired with your development program. You build your solution, the content builds, you get your game out. But when you're talking to a release time frame, you need to change how you do it. And this is more of an indication of how you do a release. So you actually compile your builder into its own release project. You do a release build of your content for the platform. You do the release content of your game, mash them together. That becomes your release. And we're hoping to have more documentation and guidance across the life scale of 385 with community feedback to help make that even better. With 385, also, we're going to see the release of the 3D platformer. We've done some last final tweaks and things, making sure it works 100% with the content builder in the way it does, hardening down like the Blender pipeline for editing scenes and doing content, so that everyone who's not a sponsor now will have full access to this and other platforms. And again, test it, give us feedback. How can we improve it? What other things would you have done differently? And that will then also go into feeding to all the samples and also improving the platformer. If you think that's not enough, if you want to see more, let us know and we'll see what we can do. 385 is one of our first major releases, even beyond what we did for 384 and the hotfix. So let us know what you feel, and we aim and seek to improve. Obviously, the 3D platform there. So for those who've not seen it yet, this a converted platformer from the fantastic Kenny's assets. He did this sample for Godot. One of our foundation members took this, has converted it, made it into a MonoGame title with all the content. This is a fully playable game, several levels, menus, the works. But the only thing is not in here is multiplayer. We've thrown the kitchen sink at this thing to make sure it does everything. And if you look at some of the streams we did lots of little funky things that weren't in the original sample, like bounce effects and shrinking and squashing and bashing our poor little character into oblivion. You get to play with it, build your own games for it, learn how we did it, and then make your own, even better. So at this point now, we're going to talk about finances, and I'm going to hand over to Tom, who can talk us through how things are going.
Cool. Thanks, Simon. All right. So some updates on finances and how MonoGame is doing. So first, let's wrap up 2025. So in 2025, we were still kind of running on the funding that we initially got from Relogic, which was fantastic. So we started the year with 110K in the bank. Throughout the year, our Patreon, we talked about this the last year, that our Patreon durations kind of stagnated in 2024, or in early 2025, we're stagnated in about $800 a month. They've grown to 847, so they've grown some, which is, that's great, considering that, the economy has been difficult for everybody, so we get it. We started using GitHub sponsors, which has been another avenue for us to bring in revenue, and that's actually worked really well. We have like 40 or so sponsors on there, which is fantastic. I think there's also some benefit there to us in that sponsors actually doesn't take as much of a revenue share cut as Patreon does. So I think that helps us a little bit more. Throughout 2025, Relogic is still, contributing a $1,000 donation a month, which is fantastic. That's something they committed to when they did the initial donation that kicked off the foundation back in 2023. So in total for 2025, we gathered $25,000 worth of donations, which was great. That's more than we've gotten in previous years. The maintainer contracts, it's basically three of us that are kind of working part-time to add functionality to MonoGame and manage the repositories, manage socials, do these videos, write code, fix bugs, deal with PRs. That's the bulk of our costs. Basically, is that we spent some more on a little bit on art content for some various demos and art elements that we've used in different places, and then some money just on bounties, which we didn't have a ton of bounties that were completed last year. Some of them kind of converted. Like there was a bounty that was on me for some of the console stuff, but I went ahead and I'm not taking that money for that bounty. I'm just the work that I'm being paid for just maintaining the console repos and working on MonoGame itself. I'm considering that and not worrying about the bounty that I had. So I probably do need to clear that out. But we had a couple bounties that got finished. The Mac and Linux Vulkan fix-up bounty, because Mac and Linux, the Vulkan stuff was not working very well. The native pipeline, which was the start of making a native backend for, processing content pipeline assets, which we want to transition a lot of our content pipeline to that and not use so many random C# wrapper libraries in the native pipeline. Also the 2D tutorial, which turned out fantastic. That was, a great investment, I think, for everybody. Everybody loves that tutorial, and we're doing another one. There was also some smaller bounties that were there as well, but this is basically it. So in total, we kind of spent $105K for the year in 2025. So moving on to the next year here. So the big news is we got a new sponsor. Hang on, sorry a second. Did I lose a slide? No. Anyways, so at the end of the last year, we were talking to Concerned Ape, and he generously donated $125K to the MonoGame project, which was fantastic. Originally, his thinking was, and he doesn't like to talk about it too much. His thinking is that a lot of MonoGame really helped Stardew Valley get to as many platforms as it has. Both on consoles, on mobile devices. MonoGame's used on both the Android and iOS versions of the game. It's also now used on the PC version of the game because they had to get away from 32-bit XNA. And on the consoles, where we originally, expanded a lot of it. MonoGame on consoles kind of grew along with Stardew Valley. And is moving forward even to his new game. His new game is also based on MonoGame and some of his core tech. So he felt like this was a great, that MonoGame was great for him and his studio and his projects, and he wanted to kind of pay it back. So he made a $125K donation initially. He's also making a $1,250 donation monthly. So that increases our monthly, our monthly donations as well. So with that, which that came in at the very end of last year, we ended up starting the year with a balance of 148K. Our monthly income now is 3,500 essentially. It's a little higher, I think, today. It fluctuates a little bit depending on people coming in and out of sponsorship. So we still get $1,000 from Relogic. We're still getting we're getting 1,250 from Concerned Ape now. We're bringing in almost $1,000 from Patreon, and another $300, almost $400 getting there on GitHub. So that's starting to make it a little bit easier for us to operate moving forward. We're starting to get reoccurring donations that really help us move forward. So what we're projecting is about 140K about 42K in donations for the next year. Assuming that we stay at the current levels, which is possible. It's hard to say. But we still have like 100K in expenses. That's something that we still have going on. That said, with the starting balance that we have, knowing that we're getting around 40K a year, we still have about 2 years of a runway where we can continue this pace and keep doing what we're doing. We would like to accelerate that, so that's why we're going to continue on a funding push. So we're going to try, and that's two things. Like, one, we are going to reach out and find other big donors in various ways. We already talked about that. There are definitely some big projects that have benefited from MonoGame in the past, that we will, talk to you about that. But also we need to expand our user base. Over the last, 5 to 6 years, we've seen kind of the MonoGame user base kind of dwindle a bit. And that's for various reasons. You know, one, the core team was all busy with other things. You know, the core team was busy with other things. There was no funding to do any work on MonoGame. It was all kind of voluntary, and a lot of things were done because somebody in particular needed it for a particular project, and if they had time, they would donate it back to the project. You know, so it was very kind of disorganized. You know, so with the new foundation, we were able to start really making it an organized push towards expanding MonoGame. So I think now we're kind of refocused on this idea of expanding our user base, which has dwindled over the years. I think that, you know, the heyday of MonoGame stuff was, you know, potentially in 2020, 2019, 2021, and I think that we need to get back to that, and we have some concrete plans on how to do that. So yeah, that's basically where we have found financing wise, which I think is we're in a great position right now. We just now need to capitalize on it and keep this pace and accelerate if possible. Moving forward, so one part of that is the community site. About 2 years ago, we have the community site on the website was built on Discourse, which is basically a forum software that was pretty popular, you know, about 10, 15 years ago. And that's when we first set it up. We set up Discourse about 12 years ago, I think. So it's been up for that long. And at the time, we were bemoaning having to switch because we originally had a big forum that was all, I think it was all in, what was it? Was it Code Spaces or something like that? One of Microsoft's things. You know, we had a forum that ran for a long time. And then we had some other thing. And then we switched to Discourse, and that worked really well for us. We built that community. It was pretty expansive. There was a lot of people that were there on a regular basis. You know, if you type in MonoGame and any problem in Google, it will take you to the community site. So it had a lot of good information in it. About 2 years ago, it was disabled for two reasons. One, we were having trouble with our mail integration to try to integrate it into our mail system. Two, and nobody had at the time technical expertise and the time to deal with it. You know, and we had some tight funding. You know, two, it had a lot of spam security issues. Some of that was based on the mail integration and the problems there. And also, we had done this for 10 years, and we thought, let's try something new. So we froze that site and instead moved to GitHub discussions, as that was a new thing. We felt like, well, you know, we have a lot of our developers or people asking questions are developers. They're working with GitHub on a regular basis. Let's try GitHub discussions. So we did that, and it's been 2 years now. And looking back on it, you know, it doesn't look very popular. Like, I don't see a ton of discussion in there, not like we had in the original site. You know, none of it appears on Google search. Like, you can search for MonoGame in an issue, even something explicitly that you see something posted in GitHub issues or GitHub discussions, and it doesn't really appear in the search. I don't know why that is. Maybe it just doesn't have as much traffic. You know, and I feel like some of the movement to GitHub discussions kind of resulted in a bit of a loss of community, because I don't think that it does as well as the old community forums did. So because of that, we're not disabling GitHub discussions. We're not going to something else. We're just re-enabling the Discourse site. So if you go to the Discourse community site is now back. If you go to community.monogame.net, you'll see that it's there. I was working on fixing a couple things this morning, but it is working. The next step here is there's some theming that still has to be fixed, in particular to fit with our theme that we're still working on. I think the mobile display of it is a little bit off, you know, but in general, it all works. And we're going to try to secure it a little bit more. And the next big thing I want to do there is really, and this was a thing that I don't know if we can do now, we still have to evaluate, is looking for someone to manage the hosting instead of us managing the hosting. That's kind of complicated because we have, you know, tons of gigabytes of data in that system. So we need to be able to migrate the whole thing to a new system and keep it intact and not lose anything and make it kind of seamless for everybody. And that's really for us on the inside. But if we're able to do that, it'll make it less of a burden, because we definitely don't want to have to deal with, like we had in the past, where suddenly somebody came in there and started spamming every single post with a ton of garbage. We have to try to avoid that and not add our extra work to ourselves. But we still want to kind of keep this community going. So with that back, we're hoping that reinvigorates the community a little bit. And that plus the other initiatives we have, I think, can do that. And I think next slide is, future bounties. Simon, were you going to talk about this? You wanted me to talk about it? Or we can both talk about it?
We can both talk about it, because
So
this is certainly something we've both been. It's been a hot debate within the foundation of what next, and trying to get feedback, what's going on, what can we do. Obviously, we've currently got the mobile bounty. Actually, I'll talk about that later. There's other things that we're still shipping. Actually, yeah, did we miss a slide? I can't remember. I think it's a slide later. And we're just hard pressed to try and find what next. The 2D shaders tutorial has been very popular on the sponsor site, and in a couple of months that'll get released to the general public as well, so everyone else can get there. And the 5 shaders in there, people have seen it as like a fantastic resource to learn how to do shaders in 2D, but also it gives them some out-of-the-box effects. So once the 3D tutorial starts coming out, we also then want to build a companion project for that for 3D. So not just here's how to do 3D shaders, but also then giving templates for things people can take, tweak, do what they want, and leapfrog from there. Because you had some other thoughts as well, didn't you, Tom?
Yeah, I mean, the 2D shader tutorial has turned out fantastic, and I think that was a great example of what we could build, as far as learning content. And part of the foundation is, in its charitable organization, is education, and showing people how to do these things, because writing code is different than just dragging boxes around. You have to learn how things work, and the 2D shader tutorial really teaches you in a very structured way, like how to build upon these ideas to be able to build more complex shaders and complex effects. So doing the same sort of thing with 3D shaders, I think, is going to be fantastic. And a networking sample, we'll have to get into the details of what that is, but the networking sample would be a good example to show people. And I wonder if we can, we'll see when we get to building it how we do it, but there's tons of options for networking as far as different libraries and backends, so it's definitely something that could be very elaborate if we wanted to make a pretty interesting networking sample for everybody, to kind of mostly just so that someone that's coming into the year, fresh, understands how to make that work and how to, add functionality for networking into their own game. And then the Steamworks tutorial, what were your plans for that?
Yeah, I mean, one of the other big calls we keep getting in the community is because of, well, how do I get to console X? How do I deploy to platform Y? And to be honest, this is something that's really glossed over, even with all the other engines out there, of the 2D beginner tutorial that we showcase. And that shows you go from greenfield to getting it running on a platform. So it goes, the whole thing is the first tutorial we've ever seen where it actually does that. So the idea is that we need more tutorials where you've got your game, you're building it out, right, fine, how can I get it to somewhere? How do I get it onto a store? How do I integrate with that platform? Steamworks is about the easiest, most open one we can think of, but we're open to feedback. I know a lot of people have said, well, what about can I do to consoles, or how can I get it onto Switch, and what do I need to do? And that's something we're hotly debate of within the scope of what we can do that's sort of within the scope of the NDA that we can say publicly, because NDAs are a nightmare in negotiating these things, because you have to be in the camp to understand and know how to do the thing. But if you don't know how much work's involved before you get involved, are you setting yourself for a fall later on and things like that? So I think this is just the first of the tranche of, we want developers to be successful. We want them to be able to have their games ready, not to lock down any alleys, and that when they're getting to a point of, right, I need to ship to something, their game's ready for that. And doing it is either going to be this, I think, Tom, we even discussed about Steamworks is one fine, but and I discussed this with my source as well, that we almost need like an open source cross-platform way to do these integrations, because it's the same things, it's just different plugs on the other end.
I mean, it's complicated. Like there's a reason why it's hard to find, even in Unity and Unreal. Like take Unreal for an example here. It touts to have a singular API for leaderboards and for stats and for multiplayer and networking and things like that. But once you get in there and you actually try to use it on some of these platforms, it just doesn't work. Like there are definitely, you can find people asking, having issues using leaderboards with Unreal Engine in just stock Unreal Engine the way that it is. A lot of times you have to modify that code to make it work. It's just hard to write one API that works across all the different, I don't know what to call them, I guess, network systems, or, like Xbox Live and Steam and, PlayStation Network and Nintendo Online. Like they all have differing rules for how things are supposed to work. And because of that, it's very difficult to write one API that works for all of them without basically watering it all down to the same function, the same very basic functionality for all. Like some of them have the ability to have leaderboards that reset, for you on a regular basis. Some of them do not. Steam essentially has endless leaderboards. You can have as many users as you want in it. You can make a new leaderboard for every day of the week. It doesn't care. But on other platforms, it's very limited how many users you can have in the leaderboard and things. So it's very difficult to write one API that works everywhere seamlessly. And that's why you just don't see it, and why the implementations that are out there with, super AAA engines like Unreal Engine, they don't even have a good solution that works everywhere all the time. So it's very difficult to pull that off. And really from my perspective, some of that ports games to different platforms, a lot of time we're basically reusing code that we've used in the past and modifying it to fit the needs of that new project, but every time we end up having to make some changes based upon the needs of the project. So, is it possible to write a single API that works everywhere? It could be possible, but it is a big endeavor all on its own. It's not just, just wrap this and it'll be done. It's like, it's pretty complicated to do. And that's just thinking of one thing like leaderboards. To do it thoroughly, you have to do leaderboards. You have to do, the save system, which is a separate thing, but, it kind of involves that. You have to do, networking to some extent, because that's a whole other class of thing. And it could be that we just need to take this in pieces, like say let's make a good leaderboard API that works on all these back ends, but that's a huge project all by itself, amazingly enough. So yeah. I think it's possible, but starting with something as a focus tutorial on something like Steamworks, I think is a good way to approach it to begin with.
Yeah, and as we're pitching it as like a tutorial, this is how you would do it. It's not binding us into anything, something we're delivering. It's just, this is how it works with Steamworks. And then that can almost start the discussion for, well, how do I define what a basic interface is that could, from the front end, at least in the game side, unify how do you build your MonoGame ready for those kind of things. So very much peacefully, again, these are bounties. This is long term. This is not next month. This is like 2026, probably into 2027, because it's, as Tom says, it's a hard problem, and no one has a good solution out there. I think I've seen some Unity assets which try to do this, but even then, they're locked into a single way of doing things. And if you want to do something else, you need to buy another asset to do something else, change how you do it, and even then, doing it in a cross-platform way that doesn't break your game every time is difficult. I mean, the work we're doing with the storage container will probably help towards saving, but it's not the end solution, is it, Tom?
No, for sure it's not.
Yeah, it's just doing what we can to get things moving and get on. But again, we're built off our community. We take feedback and use. If any one of these moral lights shout out to you, let us know. That we're all on Discord, or there's a new Open Hours feedback channel on the GitHub discussions, and throw your thoughts in there about well, I demand, I expect this kind of tutorial or this bit of content. And again, these are tutorials and samples. These are packages we build ready for the community to use to help you on your game dev journey. So we're always looking for feedback. But anyway, I think we've said all we can say about that. We could probably say more about this, because this is the future of MonoGame driven by the community, because we're building things to serve the community along with as well as the time we're extending the framework and giving more capabilities and trying to get these on. But let's get on to the more funkier thing of where the future's going here. Because I think, Tom, this is another two-parter. Because also this is now our roadmap. So we've got 2025 out of the way. We're as close as we can be with 385. We need to make sure this is ready for the community, and even not just the base, but also the previews are rock solid, even in the previous stage. We don't want to, there are no half measures. We're not throwing out something that's just going to break. Let's have to do another fix. It's not going to happen.
Right. I mean, from my perspective, like, I want to make sure that the content builder works the way we expect it to work on day one, and people don't run into trouble with it. People have had enough trouble with the previous content builder iteration, which I was always very disappointed where it ended up. I kind of went hands off with it for a long time, and it kind of just rotted and like was the death by a million cuts of just bad decisions and problems that led to it being as bad as it was, which even I, using it, on some infrequent basis to, dealing with console ports, would run into things that the builder tool would do and be baffled by what it was doing. It was definitely, a lot of, and I've talked about it before. I think we depended too much on new fancy features that were not reliable, and I think it cost us, caused a lot of problems. So this new approach is fantastic. It gets rid of a lot of those issues, and I think it's a pretty fresh way to approach the problem. And we just want to make sure that it's rock solid, that it's a one-click, you build, the content builds, it's done, no weird errors, no mystery, could not resolve NuGet dependency bullshit that we've seen at other times. If you mess with MonoGame enough, you run into that stuff.
But I'll also say, Tom, as well, meaningful errors. So when things do go wrong, you get a meaningful reason to find out what the hell is going wrong. Not some random DLL, error code 43, and you're like, what?
Yeah, that's critical. And some of it is hard for us to control because we cannot fix the entire .NET ecosystem. But we want to try to soften it as much as we can, so that if something does go wrong, it gives you something actionable to address it with. So to us, continuing the content builder improvements, that's a key thing as we move forward. But this first release, we want to make sure is as stable as possible, so that, and again, it's still in preview, so we don't expect that it's final, but we want to make the first experience somebody has with it, solid, as so far as that we're trying it. We're testing the builder and the latest templates and everything on brand new laptops that have not had MonoGame installed before, just so that we can verify that this thing works everywhere without any problems. It probably won't mean that somebody won't run into an issue, but we're hoping that the issue is apparent and easy to fix. So that's a key thing for us, not just for the future MonoGame, but also just to for that fourth point of just improving the user experience, just having a better user experience that makes that not feel unfun. So yeah, that's a key part to it.
Yeah, and we've already started a lot of this work, but that work is sort of in holding because we need to get 385 out in its current state without adding any other complexity. Once 385 hits, we've got several PRs which have already been worked on, ready to smash into it. One of these, Harry's done a shed ton of work to actually remove all the warnings or the concerns. If you build MonoGame from source today, there are a few thousand warnings that put it there, and Harry's gone through and cleared out a lot of them, especially related to the content builder.
Yeah, that's really it's nice for people that are building from source. It's annoying that those warnings were there. A lot of them were just there because newer versions of .NET started spitting out more warnings on certain things, not necessarily things that were actually bugs, but things that, were, because the standards kind of changed over the years. So that PR that cleans up those warnings is great. It makes it easier to spot actual problems. But we don't want to touch that until 3.8.5 is out the door.
Yeah, and there's some refactoring work and things on. So just quality of life improvements of case of, well, this was the first hitch, but we've learned things since then, but we don't want to break even what people are currently using now. Not that any of these changes realistically will change the end user experience, but it adds uncertainty. So we're holding them from those until that's out. The end of the day is you want a process where you've now got effectively a console program that will build your content and spit out all the XMBs or copy the content into the folder, ready to be picked up by your game. No fuss, no mess. It runs on its own and can even be run through automation without any issues. There's no .NET dependency issues. Everything's in one place. It just works. And this leads sort of like to the second one, which is there are features in there, but we're not really talking about opening them. Is that there is no actual content builder server built into the framework, and it's been improved on. The intention being here is that if you're working in a team of developers on the same project, there is one asset server in the back end that's constantly building and running the content. When your game runs, it doesn't get it from your local machine. It actually gets it from the server as you're running. Granted, this is focused 100% as the development life cycle. We do not expect runtime games to use this because, in fairness, a lot of platforms wouldn't accept it anyway. No doubt someone will try. We can probably say with good certainty it won't work. Well, this is to speed up the development pipeline. So an artist can go away, working on the content. They simply commit the work in. The built server will rebuild it on the fly, and then the next time some QA person or developers using it, they get the fresh asset. There's no lot of going on. And even as a single developer, this is going to help accelerate your workflow because we all work on multiple screens. I go and change some art, save it. I don't need to then reload the game, get back to the point where I was. I'm actually in the screen where that content is. It reloads. I can see the effect as I'm working. So this will help to further accelerate the development workflow. And again, community's help and feedback on this is going to be critical because it is a fantastic new achievement, but we can expect the way teething troubles in the beginning, but in the end, improving the overall experience of your building the MonoGame and things that arguably you don't really see with other platforms and other engines and things like that, which improving your testing cycle, improving your development cycle, improving your shipping cycle to ensure that building your game from start to finish and getting out the door, getting updates built and finished, tested reliably, and ensuring that all of the tools, all of the content, all the facilities are all completely automatable, have meaningful errors and things like that, so that through automation you can identify problems as soon as possible. Because everyone knows when you're building these things, you build unit tests, you can build content tests now, and so it just improves the overall quality of it. And this is a big feature or focus for 2026 now, is that we're wholly focused now that we're getting to a good, much more stable base with new features. That end user experience from onboarding, from getting someone in, getting their project set up, and then managing it, maintaining it, and building content, and shipping it. We want to improve that whole scale. And again, we welcome your feedback to that. And one of the other things, Tom, I think you wanted to speak about was the kind of vision, not committing to anything, but the vision we have around trying to also improve the whole graphical and the effects system in the back end.
Yeah, I mean, this has been something that I've been wanting to address for a while as we're finishing up getting the console platforms updated to the new native backend. So we have a unified backend there. The next step is to kind of re-look at our effects system and try to make things smoother. Like currently, anybody that's working with the effects system now knows that basically there are these hacks you have to do depending on what platform you're building for. If you're building for GL, you have to use the old style, text 2D kind of sampling method where you pass in a texture name, to sample from, or a texture object to sample from using text 2D command. Whereas the newfangled way to do it, which you use with the DirectX 11 backend and with the console backends, is to pass a sampler and then do sampler.sample and then pass it the texture name So you have a different way that you formulate, samplers and textures and sampling textures. So that has always been a real pain. There's also dumb things like that we adopted from the original XNA, which XNA adopted from, DirectX and the effects system there, which is for an effect object, you would have like a technique, and then inside the technique, you would have passes, and inside the pass, you would define the shader, the vertex shader and the pixel shader, potentially one or the other or both. And in that, you'd have to define, well, how do you want to compile the shader? What is the shader model you're compiling for? Well, that's an old school way of thinking to begin with. There used to be a thought that there was some benefit back in the shader model 3 days. There was some benefit to say, well, if I compile this for shader model 1, it can be more optimized than if you compile it for shader model 3. And that used to be true back then. It's not true anymore. All that really doesn't change how efficient your shaders are. It doesn't do anything. It's basically a waste of time to be messing with it. The only thing that is beneficial is for the system to be able to ensure a minimum, compatibility, so that it doesn't target the highest level, so that old hardware does not work. And we have to. I think there's a better way for us to address that than addressing it by having a developer explicitly have to specify a shader model, especially, on consoles, where on consoles there's not, different shader models. There's one shader model for that platform, and that's that. So, and for each of those, we're having to specify a shader model. It's all kind of artificial. So I want to clean that up where you don't have to mess with that anymore. That we want to pull that internal, and you just say, here are the two shaders I want to use here. This shader, the effect system will figure out on its own what the best thing is based upon how you're compiling that. If you're compiling it for one platform versus another. So that's a pretty big refactor, just that. And then on top of that, we do want to start adding the other shader stages, like a geometry shader stage, and eventually compute. But to do that, we really have to step back, look at the effect system, and rework some of the core elements of it. We need to get rid of the way that we currently cross compile from HLSL to GLSL. Originally, old people have been around MonoGame for a while. Remember that originally MonoGame only supported GLSL for shaders. And then when we added DX11, we then supported both. You could either have a GLSL shader that's only for GL platforms, and you had an HLSL shader that was only for, DirectX 11 platforms. Then at a certain point, we transitioned where you only write HLSL, and we cross-compiled to generate GLSL, which was a good step forward. At least you didn't have to write your shaders twice if you target two platforms. But the next step is, making that making the differences that you would have to have depending on what platform you're targeting kind of go away. So that's a big push to do that, and then add the additional shader stages. If we can produce that, I think we'll have a better shader environment moving forward. It'll also mean that, for using shaders or sharing shaders between different developers when you're targeting different platforms will be easier. So I think that's a big part of moving things forward graphically for us into the future.
Yeah, and hopefully this is sort of evident from the way we're taking this forward now in 2026, that the investments and the donations and the support we get from MonoGame, we're doubling down or trebling down in some cases to address those critical things, to move the platform forward, and arguably make MonoGame just better than it ever was before. And now that we've got to a good stable base where we are, we can start to do that, especially with the addition of the new native platforms, to make access to all the native systems that much easier and a lot more performant. I think you also did some work on. We were looking at video encoding or something with the native platform, Tom, and how the native platform is improving that access.
Oh, you mean video encoding? Oh, you mean basically just video playback?
Yeah, that was a video playback.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, the native platform, there is a video player that's in there that is not fully implemented. And I guess we didn't really capture this in the roadmap, but it's one of those things that we need to address. And this kind of came up the other day because we noted that the compatibility layer that Steam has to run Windows games on Linux boxes or in Steam Deck had a fix in it for MonoGame titles in particular because of how they handled video. basically for a long time we've used platform-specific videos for, platform-specific video engines in order to play videos on platforms. So like on Windows, we would use the Windows Media Player backend. There's two different acronyms like WMS and WHS or something like that. I don't remember the two. But there's two different systems, but basically they're the same thing. They're the built-in video playback engine that's in Windows. And on Windows, we would target that. But then if you were targeting, Mac or Linux, we'd use whatever was available there, which sometimes I think some of those might not even be implemented, and some of them might, like on iOS, we use iOS's system for doing that. But those systems are very limiting. Their only support is for playing one full screen video, and that's it. And it's kind of controlled through a media playback system. There's a lot of limitations there with that. And that approach just doesn't really scale. Like every platform has a different video player. They all have their own quirks. It makes it hard to work with. So the native API for the new video system works in a slightly different way. The new video system has like the concept of a video decoder, and the video decoder can also return an audio decoder for the audio stream on the video. The video decoder is very simple. We just say, hey, video decoder, is there a new frame? Play the video. Hey, is there a new frame? There is. Give me the texture for that frame, and that's it. It's as simple as that. The audio decoder does the same thing that it does for song currently. It just returns chunks of data. You ask it for a new chunk of data, it gives you a new chunk of data, and you start playing it back. So implementing the video decoder, we're looking at implementing a couple different formats just for flexibility's sake. But the truth is we don't want to implement a ton of formats. We just want to implement the ones that are most critical to us. One is we're looking at this codec called David, which has been around for a while. I think it's part of the VLC system. I think it was done by the VLC team, or it's used by VLC. But it's the current kind of top end open source video decoding or video encoder or video encoding codec, and implementing that I think will give us good high quality up to 4K video that can run on a CPU and not kill it, and we think that's the right thing to implement for MonoGame to begin with. And because it's an open source thing with full source, we can technically recompile that library to every platform, so we can support the same decoder across multiple platforms and have it just work. So that's the approach we're taking there. And then we're going to also implement some other ones. I want to try to avoid, implementing not Vorbis, I guess Theora. Theora is the video decoder. I want to avoid implementing that. I've tried using that on a particular project, and that thing, it works, but it's really not. It was never designed for modern videos at high resolutions. It struggles with anything higher than 1080p, and it struggles even more if you're trying to decode more than one video at once, which I had to do on a project. So we're probably not going to touch that, but we might look at some other ones because somebody had suggested another video codec that we could try to use. But we don't want to go too far with it. We want to just have at least one good video system that works on all platforms, and eventually we can expose more in the system so that you could use videos in more interesting ways. Instead of just saying, hey, play this full screen video, you could potentially use it as a texture on a surface. So we want to do more of that kind of thing moving forward, but that's another initiative within the foundation to get the video player done.
I mean, it's fair to say, Tom, you can correct me if I'm wrong, we don't plan to build these things as a closed system. They're going to be open, there'll be interfaces. So if someone wants to build their own and extend into the native system through their API, we're not going to, we're open source first. If you want to do it your own way, again, because it's MonoGame, there's no controls, no bounds, other than the case of you break it, you fix it. Okay, so as you can see, we've been talking about this a lot. Actually, we've been talking about this a lot for the last 3 months about what comes next and what goes forward. So if you've got any feedback or comments out this, or if there is something you think oh my goodness, how could you have missed this? Put it in the feedback channel on Discord, the Discord discussion, or the community site when we eventually get that back up and running. We'll no doubt have a big channel there for thoughts and ideas, and the most votes wins. we are driven by our community for the most part. to that, I mean, guys, so like, turn ourselves to like the sponsors themselves. The MonoGame, the mobile tutorial is imminent. We hit some minor issues with running on some of the platforms and different landscapes and things like that. So we're making sure, again, that's ironclad, locked down. It's a much smaller tutorial because it's really focused, very, very focused on just how do you think about resolutions in the game, how do you handle about mobile input, and then shipping it onto iOS and Android platforms. I said with the Steamworks one, we might extend that tranche to actually then look at other platforms. And what actually came out just this last week is that with the 3D tutorial there is there in, I've got a huge, massive task to review it. And the current view is that, well, rather than wait for the entire thing to be done, we'll probably do this as an episodic show. So as and when we get chapters in, reviewed, and done to a quality level that we agree on, then we'll publish those chapters and get feedback from the sponsors to that content and get it in there and go through the whole tranche of that. And that's not to say, we won't need to go back and correct something early on. One of the things I always hit on with these tutorials is that you'll get to around chapter 10 and think, well, it hasn't explained this concept enough. So then you need to backtrack and go, right, well, this should fit here in this tutorial to say this is when I should have explained this and what I'm doing. So we keep all these things in mind. So bear in mind, as these are being released, they're still subject to change until the entire thing's finished. And getting then sponsors be able to feedback and put content and suggestions on how to improve it. And then once it gets to the public eyes again, the same door is open. So these are not static things. We don't build content to ship out the door and then wash our hands with it. The beginner 2D tutorial that we had so much investment on and it's accelerated and made so many people happy about building with MonoGame again now. That's had lots of changes and feedback and tweaks and things. Whether someone's actually saying, well, there was a typo in the screen, there's a PR they've contributed towards that tutorial. We've had some slight changes to things in case of, well, you didn't close this off here, and stuff that we missed during the review or the developer missed when they're actually building it. But again, this is where the MonoGame community really shines. I don't see this on any other platform where everyone is involved and invested in helping everybody grow and build the best games they have. And this is how MonoGame works. We're community focused. We're building things forward, and the sponsors roadmap will go further on beyond this. So the new bounties will hit there first. We'll probably look at some other additional surprise assets and other features that will drop onto sponsors so they'll get early access and help them grow. So if you're in there sponsoring MonoGame, then we will reward you back. And I just remember we haven't actually got anything. We've not done anything with the store, or we've not even featured the store at all. But the store exists. We probably should think about doing something with that, with the new year.
Which store are you talking about?
Our actual MonoGame store.
Oh, the merch store stuff?
Yeah, the merch store.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we don't feature that too much. It's actually buried in the bottom of the website header, right, or the footer.
Yeah,
it's where the store is actually linked. So it's not super accessible. That said, we're not about just selling T-shirts, so it's not super important, but it is there.
Yeah, and again, we're open to feedback. Anything that people would want to see, if they want to see a 3D printed MonoGame logo, we can probably organize that, or other merch. I think one of the fun things I've seen is where people that get physical, you get the collector's edition MonoGame where you get this character that's actually out of a game that's been sponsored.
Yeah, I mean, my feeling with all that stuff usually is that I'd rather spend the time on the code than that stuff, than the tchotchkes.
Yeah, well, that's it. I mean, we're all on the code, get the content, get the tutorials, but it's another way for people to contribute if they want to buy merch, and other way to fund it. But obviously, that again requires an investment from MonoGame to go, right, well, we need to start creating that content to do it. So it has to be a breaking point of where it's going to be financially viable of, if we build this thing, is enough people going to want to buy it? Because then it's worth the investment. Else, we could have spent the money on code.
Right.
Kelsom in the open hours chat room is actually saying that they've got a 3D printed MonoGame logo. But I'm going to challenge you and say, sorry, no picture, no doesn't count. You have to see it.
Yep, got to see that on Discord or the new community site.
All right,
or the new. So questions. We haven't done questions yet.
Yeah, well, one thing obviously is that if you follow us on Twitch and MonoGame on YouTube, then I've lost the thing. Where is it? So give us a good old like and subscribe on the YouTubes. And
oh wow, that thing's crazy.
Oh yeah. Oh, if you're on Twitch, then give us the old like and bell. Oh, that's an interesting thing. Oh, something we didn't put on here. Dom, I don't know if you're around to chat. We reached some milestones with our socials at the end of the year or the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Go on.
Go on. I mean, yeah. So we did. That's something. It's funny because we've had a YouTube account for whatever, 15 years, something like that. But we only have like 6K followers on YouTube, which seems ridiculous. But it's mostly because we never really did anything with it. And we started doing something like 10 years ago. We started having some YouTube shows and we did a little bit there, but then we quickly stopped. Like nobody had the time to follow it to keep up with it. Well, that's changed now. We're really trying to push forward with the socials and making sure that, we're putting out content, at this point, and we're starting to pick up numbers. We're getting there. Before too long, we're going to hit 6K or 7K followers on YouTube, and hopefully that'll extend to more. On Twitch, we're starting to make a little bit of progress there. Twitch is harder to kind of get into. It's more about live streaming than anything else. We have a lot more content on YouTube, but yeah, we've hit some initial milestones there. We're far away from having any income from those platforms, but for the most part, it's mostly just focused on education and, making people aware that MonoGame exists. Because I think that's the biggest thing is people are not aware that we exist, and we want to make sure that happens and show them like this is a different way to approach, writing games. It's more code centric and it can be very fun.
Yeah, it's by far one of our greatest challenges for 2026 is expanding MonoGame's reach, getting out MonoGame knowledge out to people who've not done MonoGame. And again, that is another form of contribution. If you're spreading the word, if you're getting other developers involved and showing them what kind of fun it is. We've talked to some universities about potentially trying to arrange some kind of education course that could be taken to universities. It's one of the crimes that was in the XNA days, just as it was reaching its peak. There was at least 4 universities I know had XNA on their curriculum because it was a great, fantastic way of showing you how to build C# in a fun way, and then it all went away. So I want to get back to those days and get on.
Yeah.
But hey, as it were. Right, so back to the Q&A. Now,
yeah, let's start with Q&A.
This is an open house. This is Q&A. So
yeah,
I'm trying to look back through here. I don't think I've not actually questioned. We've just talked a lot.
Oh, nobody's actually followed questions. I'll pass through here real quick and see.
Yeah.
Let's see. So one question from Square Bananas: 100K in expenses. How much of his budget for new bounties? Not a lot, because we've found it difficult to get good contributions from bounties. We've had some really good ones, and we have some that haven't been as good. It's been difficult. The problem is some of our bounties are very technical, and a lot of our users are not high-end technical people, so it makes it very difficult to do a lot with that. So we'll see. If we need to spend more, we have enough budgeting that we could spend more on bounties this year. My numbers were basically like what we project, just the way that we have been, basically, because I don't see us changing our spending levels for this next year. We're going to hold pat until we see like some improvements in donations, or if we have some bigger donors come through, then we could potentially accelerate, make somebody full-time potentially, so that we can have even more work. We can add somebody else to assist in some of these things, or make some bigger bounties, on bigger topics. The problem is the bigger topics are kind of hard to, it takes a lot of back and forth with the team in order to make some of these bigger contributions to MonoGame. So we'll probably spend at least the same amount that we have in previous years, which is around 10 to 15K. But I don't think we're going to spend a ton more. We'll have to see how that goes. Let's see.
Yep, got another one about. In fact, it's actually quite poignant. Tom, is the Discord site to notice that the gun at the moment has still been disabled.
Yep, I just re-enabled that while we were talking here. So I realized that was still disabled. I turned that back on. I'm going to go through there and make sure that we're kind of security-wise, we're locked down pretty good. Discourse has had a lot of work on security and keeping spammers out and flagging spam posts and things like that. I'm just making sure that we're adhering to the best practices there in order to avoid spammers.
Lost far too many hours when we had to take the unfortunate direction to shut it down because I was spending days clearing out posts, and unfortunately Discord at the time, or Discourse at the time, didn't give you any options for any kind of spam control. So that's of the many things we need to look at.
Right. I mean, it had some spam control, but I think it was defeated by some bad settings. Like I just realized one of the things I just locked down was I realized it was set up something like our settings at least were set to new users on their first post can post up to 3 links. It's like that's not very good for spam control. You don't want new users to be posting 3 links in a post. We also had some very lax settings as far as how quickly you could post new topics, as a new user. So we're locking that down a little bit more in order to avoid, spamming, and as we start to get back into moderating the site, we can relax some of those rules once people see that, you're posting real content and not just spamming it with some advertising for something. So yeah, it's definitely something that we're addressing. And yes, you should be able to, new users can register now.
Yep. So I suppose the question is at what point we want to say it's fully live, because obviously we want to make sure that everything's safe, everything's secure, everything's updated how we want it before we say, right, have at it.
Right. Well, I mean, it's live now. We never took it down. It was always there, so it was always live, and you could still posts, but we weren't allowing new users. So I enabled new users coming in. I changed some settings there to secure it further, and I'll do a little bit more looking at those things. And we're going to have spammers again, and that's fine. But the changes that we've made to how that works is going to make it harder for them to do any real damage. It's going to limit it, and that should keep that from happening. The only way to have spammers now is if someone that's had an account for a very long time with a high privilege level, gets their account. Their account gets hacked. That's the only way that we're going to have any significant amount of spam. And even then, there are limitations on how quickly they can post and things that keep it from being very effective. So yeah, and it's easy to, have that one user and basically block all their new content fairly quickly. So we won't have to deal with this as badly the way that we have in the past.
Yeah, I'll have to spend some time to review the new controls and things.
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of them. So
good, okay. But again, this is a continued improvement. And again, community feedback. What do you see as improvements? What else can there? But also basically have at it. Everyone go and attack. Well, not attack. Go and jump on the community site. And the irony is, the one thing we lost, we didn't lose because the site never went down. It was always online. There was a load of SEO because, as has been pointed out by several other people, GitHub discussions, there's no SEO. You can't search for an answer on there. Discord as well, which has been most people's resource for going and asking questions. There's no way to search that or find it if you need to find an answer. That's what the community site was for. So, not to say stop using Discord or stop it. If use whichever you find best, but the Discord site is probably going to be the best result for everyone chiming in on responses. But
really, literally go into Google and type in MonoGame space and anything you could think of, and it's gonna come up to the community site immediately. Yeah. Like I just typed in MonoGame trees, and the first thing is quad tree or list, tree generator released for free. Pipeline tree view, already posts. Any of those things, you'll find SEO on that very quickly. So it just shows that's where the focus is. That's where the good content is. So I think reviving that's going to kind of help boost our
Yep.
community again.
And I guess as we're the foundation, we should also start posting more stuff there, because the concern especially I'll have at the beginning, is that that's going to be a few years old. Although, granted, because the MonoGame API, and again, this is a thing we get called out for, but it's one of the most rock solid things with MonoGame. The API hasn't changed much, so the information that's on there is still valid today. There's just some tweaks and improvements we've had of late, but
Right.
the core API hasn't changed. The way you built games 10 years ago is the same way you build games now. You just got more features to you. I've always seen it as MonoGame's strengths, not changing the API with 5 minutes like certain other game engines. Okay, so another question we had, again, this was actually a question to you, Tom, is that Cactus Town asked you about the ability to play multiple songs at once.
We don't, like, in theory that's possible. How the new native song stuff is written. Now, with the old system, it's not possible. That's just how it is, and I don't think we're going to fix the old systems. The old systems, I mean,
no going back.
The desktop GL target, the Windows DX targets, the current iOS and Android targets, like those are never going to have that functionality. Some of it's because just how it was written originally. Some of it is tied to platform APIs that don't necessarily, like, I think iOS is tied to iOS's, song player, media player, and it can't play more than one at the same time.
Media player,
so those have those limitations inherently. The new system does not have that limitation. And how it's written is it basically spins up a thread, and that thread is basically just calling decode on the audio decoder and passing it into a standard, sound effect instance, or a dynamic sound effect instance technically, but it's the low-level implementation of that, saying here's a buffer, play it. So in theory, it could spin up multiple threads to do that at the same time and play them at the same time. It'll be a little bit of chaos, but it could do that. That means, because of that, it means you could do some interesting things like crossfades and things like that if you wanted to do it that way. You could also potentially do it by, we could enhance the system to support crossfading between tracks, but there's a lot of complications there. So, yes, it could be possible to do it. The API that we have at the moment does not allow for that because it's based on this media player concept. Again, we're kind of working within the old XNA API, but I would welcome like some suggestions on how to improve the API so you could play multiple songs at once, but not break the old API. We want to keep the old API around for compatibility because we still have cases of people that are transitioning from an XNA game. They're trying to bring it to consoles. So ideally, we don't just break that functionality to begin with, but eventually we do need to kind of make breaks with that. But enhancing the API that we have to support this wouldn't be a bad thing. And in theory, it could do it already.
Yeah, there's actually another question related to this. I was just typing it for the visual on the stream as well. So, is there a way to offload the new media player in the native to the background thread?
The new to the background thread. I mean, that's how it already works. Like under the hood, the media player itself just it basically creates a thread in the background, and that's the thing that manages pumping the audio data. So it already works in a background thread. It does not, there might be some connectivity to the main thread for a couple things like events, but it's not something that inherently happens in the main thread, that I can remember that it does. So I think you should be fine there.
Yeah, it's one of those continual things of taking community feedback and trying to drill things, but also especially in the native side, we're doing the best we can to make sure the fact that it's the most rugged or extensible solution that you can do out there. So even if it doesn't do exactly what you want, we've made it extensible so that you could add your own.
Yeah, and we want to evolve the API and make it more useful to modern games. So it could make sense to support multiple songs like that, So yeah, post basically a feature request to the GitHub issues, and we can go from there.
Yeah. Now, this is rather hotly debated one. So, will Discord users with GitHub sponsor get a nice sponsor tags one day? this is one of those things where it'd be nice to have a nice load of feedback to sponsors, but it's locked behind Discord features. So Discord requires certain boosts, basically paid promotion back to Discord to then open up features and unlock them. And we have discussed this in the past on the Discord itself. It wouldn't be a worthwhile use of MonoGame funds to then pay Discord so we could put something on there. That'd be nice, and it would only benefit a few people. If we're going to pay money to Discord, it's going to benefit everybody.
Right.
Well, they don't really have any features that are worthy of that, to be honest.
I mean, I have no, like, I'm the old man here, I guess. I don't understand Discord and how it works with its chits or bits or whatever the heck it is that they sell you, or nitros or whatever the heck it is. I don't understand how any of that garbage works, but, you know, we should definitely talk about it at the next Foundation board meeting and see what the cost is and see if it makes sense. I'm not aware of what the cost is, but, you know, I know that people boost their own servers. You know, if that's what needs to happen, you know, it might make sense to do that in order to have some niceties there. But yeah, we are kind of giving up some funding that can go towards more useful things, towards paying Discord for basically a badge on a name, which just sounds like a way for them to make money. But that said, you know, we should investigate it at least.
Okay, just going through what other questions we might have here. Someone's asking questions about Unity, but I'm not putting it on because we don't discuss Unity, we don't discuss Unreal, except to say that how MonoGame is different, or how MonoGame does things that are in those systems.
I mean, I don't mind answering some of those things. You know, I think what's one of them? The MonoGame is more 3D related or 2D like Unity.
No, this is more a case of whether below the placeholders like in Unity, a 3D placeholder for sponsors. Remember, not entirely sure I followed the question, but I think it's basically saying that. No, I'm not actually sure what the question is.
I'm not sure what the question is either there. I mean, there's a further one down that is MonoGame more 3D related or 2D like Unity is 3D. I mean, it's both. I mean, both 3D games and 2D games have been made with MonoGame. You know, a lot of people use it for 2D. You know, mostly because it's very convenient for that. You know, the XNA team did a really good job with the sprite batch design. Sprite batch is extremely flexible. It can do a lot of things, more than you think of. It'd be interesting to put together a list of, unique tricks you can do with sprite batch. You know, but it's a very good system. You know, the 2D shader tutorial really shows some of the crazy things you can do with sprite batch or how far you can take it. You know, and I think that's why it gets that. And a lot of 2D games are made like that, mostly because Unity and Unreal Engine in particular are not very good at 2D. I mean, they're kind of sledgehammers, and, you know, 2D is a simpler thing, and it's never been very good for those things. You know, and they've been better, but I think, they're better for 3D because of that. So MonoGame has gotten a lot of 2D games, of course, big titles like Stardew Valley that are all 2D essentially. I mean, but realize that 2D games are just 3D games on a flat plane. You know, there's nothing special about it. You know, other than that, it's all using the same APIs and everything.
That's the funny thing is, it doesn't matter whether it's a framework or an engine. At the end of the day, what you're rendering is 3D. The fact that you're doing 2D is just an orthographic projection onto the screen. Just flattening 3D to make it look 2D. Yeah. It's
the same hardware. You know, there's nothing special. I mean, way back in the day, 2D was very different from 3D. You know, but now it's all the same stuff. It's just, you know, how it's, you know, presented. But if you go look, you know, there's some really cool 3D games that are made with MonoGame. You know, there's the Infinite Flight stuff, which is a flight simulator for a long I think at this point they've kind of cycled away from MonoGame. They're using their own engine, but originally it was all MonoGame based. It's a 3D engine. You know, we worked on a project for museums that was all 3D, that had modern rendering. You know, there's some other games like Palm Ride, which is very stylized, you know, 3D thing. You know, there's stuff like Tamashika, which will be coming out soon on consoles. That's a first person, you know, kind of, you know, shooter of sorts. It's kind of interesting. You have to check it out. You know, it's all 3D and it's really cool, really neat thing. One that we came across of recently, a skateboarding game called Stunt Boost, which is really, really neat looking, which is all 3D and looks fantastic. There's a lot of good 3D games using MonoGame. Blockscape, which is incredible, you know, all using MonoGame. So
I
there's a
think
lot
quite
of
few
3D stuff as well.
Yeah, well, all of these are on the MonoGame showcase or even on the MonoGame YouTube channel with the built with MonoGame. I mean, the stuff I saw with the space exploration demo and I think that was the museum project you did. That blew my mind. Just fantastic. Just the quality of things that were in there, just to show what you could do.
It's definitely harder to produce 3D content like that. It's harder to do. 3D is inherently a harder thing to do than 2D. It's easier for us as 3D beings. It's easier for us to think about 2D things than it is 3D things. But yeah, it's more difficult to produce 3D content. Now, that's something that moving forward we want to try to improve. Like a thing that I would like to try to do to contribute to graphics and moving things forward is come up with the equivalent of a sprite batch, but for 3D that makes things easier to quickly write code for 3D games, without having to spend a lot of time in DCC tools or spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to render your scene. But it's a difficult subject. I don't know if we'll ever crack it, but we're going to try some things that make things a little bit easier.
Yeah, we did briefly talk about a crazy idea of having a sprite batch for 3D. Or an equivalent thereof. But we've actually had the Discord community has been chatting and been joining in, and they got some clarity. So what the questioner was actually asking about whether we'd have like an asset store or whether they would actually have assets that people could use in their projects. And ironically, this is what I think someone's even mentioned the fact that could we have like Kenny assets, which is quite amusing because the 3D platform which is launching. I can quickly go back because we got the shot of it somewhere.
Sure.
Let's go back to here. If we look at, let's see, where are we now? Back. Mm-hmm. Where is it there? That is built with Kenny's assets. So this is what's coming in 3.5. We do already have Kenny's FPS sample already upgraded. That will be the next one that will be sort of going into the sponsors area for everyone to access. We're not in constant, but we are in communication with Kenny as well about whether or not we can work on a collaboration between MonoGame and Kenny and other asset things. Yes, we don't have an asset store per se, but this is where the community jumps.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think that we need an asset store. Like that's, it's hard to manage an asset store and make good content out of it. I think what we need to focus on is being flexible about the kind of assets that you can bring into MonoGame, like improving our support for FBX, improving our support for what's that other format that people are using now? I forgot the name of it, but is supporting more input 3D formats. Texture formats, we actually supported crazy formats that no one ever used. We kind of backed off of that a little bit, but all our 2D formats all work pretty seamlessly. We want to do the same thing with 3D formats and import the most that we can. It's just that once you get past just importing a model, which we can do that, and rendering it well, we can do that. Then you get into things like animation, which become very hard to do in a way that is cross-platform, that supports everything. So that's going to be a push as we move into the future, is to make that our 3D path easier so that it is more like the experience of using Sprite Batch, even though Sprite Batch is extremely simple, because just 2D is inherently a lot simpler to deal with. So yeah, I don't see us having an asset store anytime soon or ever, technically. I think that time is better spent, on things that are very specific to MonoGame, like the resource system, where we have, if you go to the community site, I think it's on the community site. No, it's on the create site. There's a section for resources. And if you go to community resources, it lists things like sound effect libraries and, books and, AI libraries for writing custom AI for your games and, libraries for networking and for different physics engines and things like that. Like that, I feel is more interesting because the whole point of MonoGame is that it's a core framework that handles your platform specific bits. But, if you want to pull together a project quickly, you could pull this physics engine and you could pull this AI system and you could pull this networking engine and marry them all together in your code and come up with a game out of that. And we want to make that process fast and easy, so yeah, that's the resource page. So you can select, multiple things there. If you hold down shift, I think you can multi-select. So you can do like 3D and then in shift, and yeah, you can do that. You could do 3D and physics and get physics engines basically that are 3D support. You know, if you switch that from 3D to 2D, you'll get 2D engines, you know, that are supported. You know, so those are the things that I think that are more useful for us to spend time on, is making this more easier to find this content. You know, right now it's a little bit buried in the site, but you know, finding this stuff I think is more interesting, especially from just the MonoGame perspective, that we are a code first framework and not a drag and drop, you know, game builder.
Yeah, there are people who build assets, and that's what they focus on. And it's our job really just to highlight saying, well, if you need assets, go there, rather than us trying to maintain a store. We've had another question come in. I'll go back to the other slide a second. So, with the vision for the refreshed effect system, would you consider adding custom markup to the shader lang, similar to the Unity shader lab, where you can set input ranges and such?
I mean, we definitely could do something like that. You know, it's funny that the old effect system had that stuff, right? Like the old effect system that Microsoft came up with back in 2004 or something like that. You know, the old effect system had the concept of annotations. So you could have a shader constant and define an annotation, and the annotation could define things like a description and a decorative name, or a display name for it, and ranges and things like that. But we never really implemented that because it didn't really work. It really wasn't helpful at runtime for most things. And, you know, because things were kind of primitive, we didn't support those things. We could revive something like that if we wanted to do something of that nature, really mostly for people that are trying to build their own tools around things. It's possible that we could have some annotations on shader parameters that, you know, you could then get to through the effects API. I think if you look at the effects API, it is there already. Like, it just doesn't return anything useful. Like if you go to our documentation hub and then go to the APIs, you'll find, where is it? API reference. And if you go to effect, I think it's like effect. I think it's going to be effect parameters and something. Where is it? I mean, you'll find effect annotation, which is what that thing is. You know, where you can define, you know, different elements to it. But yeah, like there are things like that that we could potentially expand on and finish implementing that allow us to write more data about particular parameters, and then you could potentially use that at runtime or just at editor time, you know, to do stuff. So yeah, I think there are things that we can do there to you know, make it a little bit richer, you know, as far as the usefulness of effects files and things. But you know, shaders are a very complicated thing, so it's hard to say, like, until we really get in there, it's hard to say how far we can take it. But I think it's definitely possible to do that. Just have to kind of see as we go. You know, the first thing is just to try to get unified. And then once we're kind of unified, where we have one shader description that can be used across all of our platforms without modifications, then we could start adding additional tags to things to make it work. But you know, we don't want to go too far, because if we go too far, then it becomes difficult to use, you know, examples off the web, right? Like if you go too far, it becomes difficult to take anybody's HLSL example and apply it, because we have to mark it up with a bunch of specialized markup. So we want to kind of stay as pure as we can to HLSL, because that's kind of arised as kind of the de facto default language across almost all the platforms, and all the engines. We want to kind of have a unified approach to that, and then once we have that, we can potentially add some extra markup in places that enhance things, but we don't want the core of it to be something that is very specialized to MonoGame. You know, because we just don't want to maintain our own format. Let's see. Yeah, you know, Xbox 360, you know, back in the day, I mean, that there was definitely 3D games there. It's interesting that that's where it started, but you know, it ended up kind of, I think a lot of people that did that kind of stuff have moved on to more, you know, drag and drop editor kind of things like Unity or Godot. And some just full blown, you know, Unreal Engine, which, you know, every time I've had to fire up Unreal Engine and build something and wait, you know, 40 minutes for a build, you know, it's, you know, it kills me. So yeah, there's definitely there's definitely really high-end XNA titles that were out there back in the day, and some really cool samples. And we need to kind of bring that back and make that an easy path for people. And that's part of our goals for this year.
Yep, and I realised I was muted when I put that up. But yeah, I mean, I love that, and I love the days of the Dream Build Play competitions, and I hope at some point the world can get back to that. To be honest, open honest, people have been asking about doing a MonoGame Jam, and yes, that's something we also want to do. But we want to make sure that it's bold, it's big. MonoGame is also in a stable in the best place it can be, so it would definitely be as soon as we got 3.5 out, and to enable people with the resources, all the resources we can pull together to try and make it the best thing going, because no one wants a game jam and only 5 people turn up. But just to let everyone know, it is something we are discussing. It's pretty much every month it comes up. We always have a line item about talking about game jams, and it is something we want to do, but it has to be when MonoGame is right. We don't want people to start the game jam, hit the MGCB editor, .NET compiles, breaks everything, and they're suddenly stuck. It has to be clean, quick, work, no problems, and straight out the box.
Yep. Here's another question. What do you think about the one-shot WME? This game is made in MonoGame, but I don't see this project in MonoGame site and other things. I've never heard of it before. I think I've seen the art once or twice. I don't know. I think I've seen something, but I've never really looked into it. There's no reason why any MonoGame title isn't on our showcase other than no one's taken the time to add it. That's definitely something that, we would add. We haven't looked at it at all, but yeah, that's always cool. Let's see what else.
Let's see. I mean, the MonoGame showcase is there. It's right in the header bar, and we apart from the fact, the only criteria is it has to be a game built with MonoGame, and it could be published in HDO or it could be published on something else. It has to be at least a finished game. But you got a title, we put it up on here. You simply go off and do here the showcase submission templates. That takes you to GitHub. You fill in all the details. You provide the logo and the artwork, which platforms it's on, and as soon as we can, we publish that on the showcase. So everyone has free access to that, and there are no blockers other than it being a shipped game on something.
Yep. All right, so we've gone over. It's an hour and 30 minutes.
Wow. Well, this is our New Year bash.
Sure.
Chris says they would be 1,000% happy with supported HTML demonstrations.
Yeah, I think we could probably do that and take it a step further. It's been a long time since I looked at that documentation on exactly how that works, but we could definitely do something there. I mean, making something generic that you can then, as someone writing an ID, could do it in different ways. That could be a good way to approach it instead of something very formalized. But we'll have to see. We need to evaluate what everybody else is doing as well.
Yep. And as ever, I suppose as we start to wrap up, if you have feedback, if you have comments, either drop them in Discord, drop us a feature request or a request of information in the GitHub. Those are the 2 primary channels we listen to. But as the new community site heads up, we'll make sure there's a dedicated area where if you've got a question, you want feedback, we want to listen. We are built on our community, and we are here to help and make the community grow, make everyone's development dreams grow, as it were. And it looks like some people are commenting on Discord now that if we had a game jam, it can't really be 48 hours because we're a framework, not an engine. I'd argue you could do a lot in MonoGame with 48 hours, but again, we listen, we talk, we get feedback, we challenge, we chat, and go on. So, but anyway, yes, as rightly Tom, we're way over, but this is the new year. We got lots to talk about here and lots of feedback. So, I think to me, adieu. Any parting comments, Dom or Tom?
Nope. Looking forward to the new year. We have some cool stuff coming, some secrets we're not talked about today.
We can't talk about the secrets. You're letting them
talk
cut
about the
out
secrets. Yeah, secrets. Maybe the next. The next one we'll talk about the secrets.
Too much.
Hopefully.
Tease. Fingers crossed. Yes, there's a lot of work to do. lots of work to do to get these secrets ready.
Yep.
We need a dictionary to spell the word secret first. We can get on with it.
Yep.
But anyway, so this has been your MonoGame. We thank you everyone for joining. We welcome you to just chat, discourse, whichever way it goes, and let us know how we're doing for you and what we can do to make your lives better than everyone. So thanks everyone, and we will see you again next month. Well, actually, technically speaking, I'll see you tomorrow. Tomorrow, and Tom, you'll see everyone on Friday.
Yep, exactly.
See you all online. Ciao.
See you around, and bye.